Hey there, it's Laurie. Today I'll show you how to make a winter pine cone tree, or you can change it up a bit and use it for Christmas, a snowman DIY, and a hanging snowflake sampler. I used mostly Dollar Tree supplies, and as always, I hope you have fun crafting with me. So let's get busy. To make my winter pine cone tree, I'm getting started by using one of the orange safety cones from the Dollar Tree. I found this in the toy department, and mine measures 9.5 inches tall. I'm covering the cone, and I'm using a burlap sack that I already had on hand. They do sell burlap at the Dollar Tree, or you can use any type of fabric that the glue will adhere to. I cut the bag open, I pressed out the fabric, and mine measures 15 by 16 inches. I'm attaching the fabric to the cone, so I placed my cone about 1/3 of the way down from the top. I added on some hot glue and then began to wrap it. I kept adding on a generous amount of the hot glue, and don't worry if it's not a masterpiece because all of it's going to be hidden. When I came to the bottom of the cone, I attached all the edges, and you can cut off the extra fabric if you want. I just tucked mine inside. With the burlap attached and in place, I'm now attaching my pine cones. The pine cones I'm using were picked up off the ground, and I sorted them, so I'm using the largest ones on the bottom. To attach them, I'm adding a generous amount of hot glue, and the most important part is to make sure that your pine cones make a complete ring around the bottom of the base. And as you glue them, you tuck them as tightly together as possible. You'll also want to make sure that your pine cones sit flush to the bottom so that your tree isn't kind of offset or tipping to one side. With the bottom row of pine cones in place, I'm working my way up and adding on my second layer. I started using Gorilla Glue for most of my projects, except of course if I run out, and I did notice that when you use it and you glue something in place, it pretty much is never going to move. It is a little more expensive, but to me it's definitely worth using. With the first 2 rows complete, I'm adding on my next, and I'm using some pine cones that are just a bit smaller, and I'm attaching them on the exact same way. After adding on the hot glue, I'm tucking them together as tightly as possible. With those in place, I'm just continuing to follow the same instructions and adding on my pine cones. As I'm working my way upwards, I started with the larger pine cones on the bottom, and now I'm adding on the smallest ones that I have. I attached my last 4 pine cones, and then to finish off my tree, I attached one directly onto the top. I have all my pine cones attached to the tree, but because they're not all exactly the same size, there's some little openings here and there between them. To fill those in, I'm using some small pine cones, and I found these at the Dollar Tree. Wherever I saw an open area, I added some hot glue and then tucked one of the little pine cones inside. With my tree complete, I think it's so pretty as is, but I'm going to give mine a bit of a snowy accent. This next step, it's completely optional. I'm using some of my white acrylic paint, and I'm giving my tree a kiss of snow. I used my paintbrush and I just kind of dabbed the white paint here and there, and you can give it as much snow or as little as you'd like. With your tree completely dry, you can always leave it as is, but you know me, I want to add on a little bit of a sparkle. I have a Dollar Tree stem and I'm using some of the silver berries. I removed 2 clusters and then I pulled off all of the berries. I now have a bowl full, and to attach them to the tree, it's super easy. I'm just adding some random dots of hot glue here and there and pushing on a berry. It's hard to see in my video due to the lighting, but when the light hits them the right way, they send off a little bit of a shine, and it looks like the snow is glistening on the tree. When I finished up with the silver berries, I really liked the way it looked, but I wanted to add in just a pop of color. I had a sprig of red berries on hand, and you can find packages of them at the Dollar Tree. I just removed mine from the stems. I'm not adding on as many as I did the silver, but just enough to give it that hint of color. I didn't have any set place that I was adding them. I kept turning my tree around and then just randomly added them here and there. If you wanted to turn it into a Christmas tree, you could always add on some different colored berries or even some small ornaments, and then maybe wrap it in a string of fairy lights. To finish up, I'm giving my tree a base, and I'm using one of the metal jumbo pencil cups from the Dollar Tree. I removed the label, I turned it upside down, and I added some hot glue to the top. I placed it inside my tree, making sure that the tree was sitting perfectly straight. And with that, this cute winter or Christmas pine cone tree is complete. If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking on that little red subscribe button below, leaving me a thumbs up, and to all my returning friends, I'm always so happy to see you and I love reading everyone's comments. To make my snowman, I'm using 3 large palms, and these came off of some Dollar Tree Santa scarves. I used them to make a Santa Claus wreath, and I do have that video linked below in case you'd like to check it out. And this was a great way to repurpose them. Another great option is to use some of the Dollar Tree snowballs. I want my snowman's head to be a little smaller than his body, so I'm trimming down one of the palms. I'm attaching all three of them together and I'm using a wooden skewer. Using the sharp end, I'm pushing it through the top, the middle, and the bottom palm. I'm using my glue gun to attach them together, just placing a little bit between each palm, and I'm leaving about 3 inches or so of skewer at the bottom. I'm leaving about 1 inch on the top, and what I clip off, I'm using as the snowman's nose. I used my clippers and clipped the end off into a little point, and then using some orange acrylic paint, I gave it a coat. For my snowman's hat and scarf, I'm using a pair of gray and white fuzzy socks from the Dollar Tree. I want to puff the snowman's hat up just a little bit, so I'm using 4 everyday cotton balls. I placed them into the sock and then slipped it over my snowman's head. I'm tying the end of the sock off into a little palm, and I'm using a piece of thin white ribbon. I squeezed the end of the sock together, wrapped my ribbon around it, and tied it into a knot. I want to make the back of the hat just a little bit thinner, so I'm adding some hot glue down the middle and then pinching the sock together. To add on the snowman's eyes, I rummaged through my button jar and I found 2 small black buttons. While I was looking, I also found 3 accent buttons for his front. I used my hot glue gun to attach his eyes, and then I added on the 3 buttons. With those in place, I'm now adding on the carrot nose that I painted. I added a dot of hot glue onto the snowman's face and then pushed the carrot into the palm. To make the snowman's scarf, I'm using my second sock. I'm first removing the toe part, and then I'm cutting it down both sides. Once I cut the sock, this type of fabric, it curled, which actually works out great because it makes it that much smaller. And then I just wrapped it around the snowman's neck and tied it into a knot. I wanted to give my snowman some rosy cheeks, so I put a little bit of blush on the end of a cotton swab. I then placed a dot on both sides of his face. To accent my snowman's hat, I'm using one of the Dollar Tree's silver foam snowflakes. I added some hot glue to his hat and then attached it. I headed outside and I clipped a couple of twigs for his arms. I first found their placement and then attached them with my glue gun. To make the base for my snowman, I'm using one of the small Dollar Tree terracotta flower pots, and I'm painting it with some white acrylic paint. I'm decorating it by using 2 of the silver and 2 of the white Dollar Tree foam snowflakes. Attaching them was super easy. I attached the 4 of them around the bottom of the pot. To help my snowman stand straight, I'm using one of the large snowflakes from the Dollar Tree, and they usually come in a 3-pack. I used a screwdriver and I punched a hole through the center. I added some hot glue to the top of the pot and then attached down the snowflake. I added a generous amount of hot glue onto the snowflake, then slipped the skewer on the end of my snowman through the holes. I have some little birds that I picked up a while back at Michael's, and I'm going to add the little red one onto my snowman's arm. Now that I'm done, this was a fun way to make a cute winter snowman. I'm starting my snowflake sampler by using 6 of the fabric gift bags from the Dollar Tree. They each have 2 knotted drawstrings on the top, so I just opened up the knots and slipped them out. You know, if you're a crafter, you always save things like this because you're probably going to be using them in another project. I removed all of the ties and I now have my 6 snowflake fabric bags. I want them to be a little puffy, and I picked up some out-of-package batting at Savers. You can always use some polyfill or even paper towels, just something to give them a little body. I placed one of the bags on the batting, and then I just cut around it. Now that I have it cut, I'm adding it to the inside of the bag. As I was adding the batting to the bag, I made sure that it was lying flat. And when this bag was complete, I then followed the same instructions for the next 5. The top of the bags are open and I need to close them, so I'm running a line of hot glue along the top and then sealing them shut. For the base of my snowflake sampler, I'm using 2 long signs from the Dollar Tree. I removed both the tags and the hangers on the back. I'm attaching the 2 signs together using 2 large craft sticks that I had on hand, along with 6 smaller Dollar Tree craft sticks. I first glued the 2 signs together, then added my craft sticks to the back. I'm using 2 of the longer Dollar Tree signs, but if you don't have access to these, you can always use a plain piece of wood. With all the craft sticks attached in place, I'm now turning the sign over and I'm working on the back. I'm actually using the bottom of the sign as the top, and I'm attaching my first 2 snowflakes. There's a stitched line on each bag where I had removed the drawstrings. I have that overhanging the end and I'm attaching my bags just below it. While I'm attaching them, I'm keeping the bags as closely together as possible. I'm turning my sign around now, and I'm continuing to use the stitch lines on the bags as a guide. I'm adding my next snowflake and tucking it up under the first. I'm attaching it just under the stitched line. From there, I'm following the same instructions, adding on my snowflakes and tucking the bags next to each other as close as possible. With the top edge of each snowflake attached, I'm using my glue gun to attach the rest of the bags to the sign and to each other. I'm adding some accents to my sampler and I'm using some jute that I had on hand. I cut a couple of pieces at about 8 inches or so, and I'm using these to tie off the bows. Making it easier to make my bows, I'm using a 6-inch piece of cardstock. I wrapped the jute around it 6 times and then slid it off. I then used one of my short pieces of jute and I tied it in the middle. After my first one was made, I then made a second. I wanted to add on 2 red button accents, and I rummaged through my button jar. I had some red buttons, but not 2 that matched. So I found 2 buttons that were similar, and then I used some red acrylic paint and I gave them a coat. I'm using my hot glue gun and I'm attaching the 2 bows into the center. And once they're in place, I'm then attaching a button in the center of each of those. I'm adding a piece of Dollar Tree nautical rope on the back as my hanger. I turned my sign over, found its placement, and hot glued it onto the back. To make sure that my hanger stays in place, I'm using 2 pieces of the Dollar Tree burlap ribbon and I'm attaching them over the rope ends. Now that I'm done, my Dollar Tree Snowflakes sampler makes the cutest piece of winter decor. If you've made it this far, guess what? We are at the end of the video, and I really hope you enjoyed making these winter and Christmas DIYs with me. If you're new to my channel and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to come back and hang out with her again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below, and if you tap on the notification bell, you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. If you're looking for more winter or Christmas holiday DIYs, I'll link a playlist at the end of this video as well as some playlists in my description. I hope you all stay safe and healthy, and I will see you soon. Bye everybody!